Hello again, and thank you for joining me in my channel. Today we'll be talking about loops. That we'll talk about the definition, the types of loops, how to exit and continue a loop, and we'll have some examples in GW Basic, which is the first language that I learned and is a great basis for any person who's learning to do programming. And then we'll go for Quick Basic, Turbo Pascal, Turbo C++, and then we'll end up with a Xojo, which is now the new implementation of loops. So let's get started. First, let's start with the definition. A loop is a sequence of statements. The type of loop determines how the program will and how many times the statements will repeat. Think of this like a code, like a block of code. There is a condition which determines how many times will or for how long will the loop continue. Sometimes there is a way to break out of the loop under certain conditions, and sometimes there's a way to continue a loop, skipping a cycle for a specific cycle. And after the loop, the program will continue to function as normal. So here we see the little diagram. There's a conditional code, and then there's statements somewhere in there, and then there's a break. You can see the break there. Now, we'll talk about the break later when I'm doing the examples on the actual programming part, because I will do these definitions first, and then we'll do live examples in each one of the languages that I mentioned before. And we'll see the reason why we would want to break out of the loop, or we would like to continue out of the loop. There's some logical and mathematical reasons for that. Even though it may not make sense right now, it will once we get to it. So there are basically three types of loops. There's the for next loop, there's a repeat until loop, and there's a while loop. Now, the naming of this differs on the language, the programming language, obviously. So the first type of loop is the most common one, is the for next loop. In this loop, the number of cycles is predetermined. Mainly, there are two parts to the loop: the header, which is executed once and is usually in the beginning of the loop, and it's usually a counter, and the body of the loop, which is the code executed for each cycle. A typical for next loop would be for I equals 1 to 10, print I, next I, or next. So that is a typical. You upfront are telling the loop, do it for so many times. Again, there are times when you can exit out of the for loop, or you may skip a number. And let's just say I want it for I equals 1 to 10, divide the number of I by 5, and or let's start by 0. Let's just say a different example. Let's say from minus 10 to 10 divided by 0, and then do the next, or something like that. There might be an error on the computer if I do that. So if there's an error, obviously I have to make sure that my program exits the loop or skips the loop. If there's something that is illegally done mathematically, or there might be a condition maybe for a specific record number, I don't want to do something, then I can skip or I can break out of the loop. So anyways, that is the for next loop. The other one is the repeat until loop, and I'm just using those names, repeat until. Basically, it performs a post test to evaluate if there's a need for the more loop. Here, the block of code is executed at least once, and the evaluation determines if the loop will continue. So I'm doing something, and then I'm saying, hey, should I continue? Yes, no. And if it's yes, do it again. If it's a logical expression, maybe a number under 10, or like I said, if it's yes, no, or something like that. But I'm doing the code at least once. That is the key. The other one is the while loop. So here it is very similar to the repeat until loop. The only difference is I'm evaluating first. While a condition is true, do the code, and then do the evaluation again. So there is a possibility that the while loop will not execute at all if the condition up front is not the correct one. If I'm looking for a positive and it's not going to happen. If I'm looking for a negative and it's not going to happen. So that's the main difference between the repeat until or the while loop. And again, I'm just using those names, but basically I'm either evaluating in the beginning, or evaluating after, and then there's a for loop. And there is another fourth loop. It's a continuation of the for loop, which is the for each, and we'll talk about it in a minute or two. All right. So in GW Basic, there's basically two types of loops, correctly, two types of loop. The syntax for the for next loop is for, and then there's a variable to a variable. And then you can see here it says step, and then there's the next. So as you can see to the right, I have an example of that, for I equals 1 to 10, print I and next I. That is the example of the for loop. Now, the reason there's a step here is because I could have done for I equals 1 to 10, step 2. So it would have been, every two numbers, it would have done that. And it could be a negative, I could say for I equals 10 to 1, step minus 1, and it's going to go backwards. So that is why there's a step. It's an optional part of the statement. And then we have the while when. So while the expression, and then something happens. So and here my example to the right, I have n equals 10, while n is over 5, print n, and then I subtract one number from n until the loop is below 5. Then the condition is negative and it gets exited out. Now, there is an improper, and GW Basic, by the way, these are the only two official loops, the for next and the while when. But there is another improper way of doing a loop that I'm mentioning here because I've seen many programmers do it in the beginning, and it is not the correct way of doing a loop, but it will work. Basically, in my example here, I'm doing a loop and I'm doing an if then condition. If something happens, go to and go back to the beginning of the block of code that I want to repeat. And then if it's not, then I go to the end of the program. So will that work? Yes, it will. It will work because I'm doing an if then and I'm doing a go to. And in the GW Basic time, remember we had line numbers. So doing the go to was a very easy thing to do. It makes for bad programming. There is no excuse for it, but yes, it will work. And I mention it here because yes, you can do a loop like that. You can force the program to jump. Now in Quick Basic and in Turbo Pascal, you also have go-tos. There's labels. You can always go to a label, but again, there's no reason to do that. I mean, I cannot find a real reason why to do something like that. But it will work. Okay, so now let's jump into Quick Basic. Quick Basic has three types of loops. The for loop, which is identical to the one in GW Basic, the while when loop, and they went ahead and added the do until loop. And this is the third type of loop that it was additionally added. In my examples now, of course, I got rid of the line numbers. Now I have my for is more cleaner. For I equals 1 to 10, print I. My while and when is the same. I'm just getting rid of the line numbers. But now I have a do until example because now they added that in Quick Basic. And is do here in my example have n equals 3, do until n equals 10, n equals n plus 1, print n, in loop. So I'm doing, believe it, even though it says do until, I'm doing that condition there instead of a while when. In Quick Basic now they're expanding. Additionally, even though my examples don't have this, they have the exit do or exit for. Like again, maybe I wanted to print the numbers from 1 to 10 except number 5. So or exit if a specific condition is, if it equals to 5, then get out, and then I would do an exit for or an exit do. So they added that to Quick Basic. We'll see examples of that when I get to the programming part. Here for now, let's just keep track that it does exist, and you can see to the right there's the example of the screenshot of this 3 loops that we have. Now we go to Turbo Pascal, obviously different way of doing the programming. Here we also have the for loop. The for loop is a for and then a variable. There's a colon and equal sign for initial, and then there's a to or the down to and the value, and then do, and there's your begin and end that you have in every block statement. And again, here now we see the to or down to, it's one or the other. So if you're going down in the numbers, you use the down two. And if you're going up, you do the two. The second is the while, and then there's your condition, and then do, your while do loop. And in my example, for example, for the other ones, for I equals 1 to 10 print, and there's my wild example. So I do I equals 10, colon equals 10, obviously. And while I is over 5, write I in 3 spaces and so on. And then we have the repeat until, and then the condition. Similar to the quick basics, the equivalent, again, it's just another type. And in here, you can use the break statement to exit a loop. It's the first time we see the break statement in here, but most versions of Pascal had a break statement from the beginning. So there it is. Then we have Turbo C++, and here we have 3 types of loops. We have the for loop, obviously. It's for, and then inside it, you can use a variable that was already predefined. Let's say I equals 1 or 10, or if you didn't, you can do var I equals 1 or 10 or whatever. You can initialize a variable value and a variable type inside the loop. So you can do for var I equals 1, semicolon, then you condition, I less than 10, semicolon, and then you're incrementing or decrementing. And in C++, we use I plus plus. I could have done plus plus I, or I minus minus, or minus minus I, depending on my loop. And no semicolon needed there. And now we have our brackets that you can have for statements. And by the way, if it's just one statement, like I could have done this without the brackets. I could have just said C out, the chevrons and the I could have done that. If it's just one statement, I don't need the brackets. That's a C++ thing. But I put them in here just to denote that is you can have a block of code. Then we have our while loop. Our while, it just has one condition. While x less than 10 is in my example. Again, if it's just one line of statement, I can do it in one line. But I put in the brackets only because I wanted to make sure that you can see that you can do a block of code. Now, if I put a semicolon on my one line and I do something else after that and then another semicolon, it counts as 2 statements. So you have to be very careful with that. Maybe you say, oh, in one line I put a C out, semicolon, x plus plus, semicolon, and I don't need to put it in a block of code with the brackets. Well, you're gonna get an error, or you're not gonna get, actually you're gonna get an infinite loop because it's never gonna get to the x plus plus. So that's gonna be a no-no. So yeah, good programming, put your brackets, don't get in trouble. Because again, if I would have done while and then x less than 10 and then just put C out and the x and semicolon and x plus plus semicolon in one line, it would have been an infinite loop. It would have been a disaster. So, and the third loop is the do while. Again, now I'm doing the condition at the end. So like I said, there's the 3 types of loops that we have. And in my example, do my code. Here I'm doing the x minus minus, and then while x over than 3, and I'm returning 0 because the proper way of doing the main function in C++ should always return something. And then I could have done the void, but no, I don't like doing that. It's int main, no arguments here, and then return 0. Now here you also can use the break, even though it says on the screen break with a capital B, it is not. It's with a lowercase. Okay, it's break semicolon. That's it. In my examples, doing my programming example after this presentation, we'll see that. And now we have Xojo. I like Xojo because it's a programming language that is a now language, And here we have a 4th type of loop, but we'll go over the other ones. First, we have our for loop, and here it is. For counter as data type equals start value 2 or down 2. Again, now we see the 2 or the down 2, and there's a step. The step is either a positive or a negative. Then we have our statements, and we have a continues, and we have our exits and more statements, and then we have our next. You don't have to do next in the variable. So if I put in for I, and in this case, by the way, look at this example of the code to the right. For I as integer equals 1 to 10. I'm initializing the I right there. And that I is only going to be good for that block, by the way. I'm declaring it right there. It's not, if I, once I'm out of that loop, that I does not exist. Okay. So I'm adding everything. Because this is a visual environment, what I've decided to do here is to create a string, which is S. And I'm adding to the string, and I'm putting the commands end of lines for jumping the line. And I'm doing this because when you add all of it at the very end, I'm making the text box equals that code. You know, that is, and here you don't print directly to the window. Instead, you do messages or text boxes or labels or what have you. So each one of my examples, I'm adding to one variable, and then at the end, I'm just assigning the variable to a text box. And when I get to the live example of this, you'll see what I'm talking about, because there's some buttons. Like I said, it's a visual environment and it's a little bit different. But here's my for loop, is the same. Then we have the do loop. And if you notice here in the left in green, do either until or do loop until. The same do loop is used both ways. So to my right on the actual code, I did both of them because they're actually different. So do until j equals 10 is one way, or do something until j equals 0. You know, am I evaluating in the beginning or am I evaluating at the end? That is my do way of doing things. The third loop that we have here is the while and when. And I mean, I don't work for Xojo, so I don't know if it's for compatibility, because the do loop does the job. But while a condition happens, when. And here is my example. While j is less than 10, do something and when. I mean, I'm saying, hey, while this condition happens, do it. So as a programmer, you can choose your do loops or your while whens. It's up to you. And there might be a specific reason why you want to use one over the other. There's both of them are correct. There's no wrong answers here. It's just a preference. And finally, the fourth type is the for each. And let me be very clear. I'm using Turbo C++ on my examples, which they didn't have a for each. But in modern C languages, uh, whether it is Visual C++ or .NET, or maybe you're using Swift, you know, it there's a for each on all of them. You know, it's just in my Turbo C, because it's a little bit older. It doesn't have the for each, but in Xojo there is. And this is the way they do it here for each element. And then I can do a data type in the array, and then you can do a next. It is a fourth type of loop. Now, it is a loop, a for loop nonetheless. Okay, it is a for loop, but it's just, it is designed for arrays. So I initialize the values of type integer, and I just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a very simple example. I just want to prove how it works. And then I said for each element in my values, just print them and add them. So it's gonna add them, and then at the end I'm gonna put in the total. And so it's just 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 5 equals 15. And so yeah, there are my loops. Now let's go ahead and start doing some live examples. So let's do each one of those so we can see how it works. Hey guys, okay, so here we are in GW Basic, and let's go ahead and look at the example of my loops. I saved the file loop, so I'm gonna do a list all the way to line 100, and here it is. It starts clearing the screen. Here's my for next loop, and I'm gonna print from 1 to 10, and I'm gonna do my while when loop. This is from the same example as my PowerPoint earlier. And then I have an example of the improper way of doing a loop, by doing the go to command. And if I run this command, there it is. There's my for loop. There's my while when example. And then there's the improper way to loop. Do not use that one. And that is the one where I start with n equals 5. And I print n, and then I increment n, and I do an if command. If n equals 10, go to 240, and which is the end. But if it's not, it continues to line 230, which is a go-to to 200. And you can see if you start doing a lot of go-to commands, this can be a very confusing. So anyways, there it is, my GW version of the loops. And now we're gonna go ahead and look at the quick basic version of my loops example. All right, so here we are in quick basic. I have loaded the file loops, and it's like the one on the PowerPoint presentation, obviously. There are no line numbers. I could use line numbers. Remember, they were optional, so I got rid of them. I also put an apostrophe instead of the REM for remark. And this is the same example as on over there. Basically from 1 to 10, I'm gonna print. Then I'm gonna do my while, n equals 10. While n over 5, I'm gonna subtract 1 by n. I'm gonna print n. And when, of course, there's my when right there. And then I'm gonna do my do until. So n equals 3 until equals n equals 10. I'm gonna add n. I'm gonna print n. When it reaches 10, it's gonna exit my loop. And so here it is. I'm going to go ahead and I will compile this. So anyways, here it is. I'm going to make a exe file and loops exe. And now I'm going to exit. And I'm going to go to, I think it's clear pixel. Nope, it's Q basically 5. And there should be my loops. And there it goes. There's my for loop, my while when loop, and my do until loop. Now, I could go back and open up my loops again. And I'm not, let me see, let's try this. I can run it from here without exiting, but it will be so fast. There it is, I can do that from here as well. Sometimes when you do that, it actually, it's so fast, there's nothing that tells the computer to wait. You don't get to see the results, but there's my loops. Now in here, as I mentioned before, the folks at Microsoft added the exit command. So what would be an example of that? Let's say on my, yeah, I can do it on my while. I can get on my while is here. So I'm going to do an exit do, actually, I'm going to do it over here. I do. Okay. So n equals 3, do until n equals 10, print n equals n plus 1. But what if I want to say if n equals 7? I'm going to do that right here. If n equals 7, then exit do. So what would happen? Okay, so let's try it. Run it, and there it is. It exited at 7 instead of 10. That is the classical use of the exit command. I'm telling it if a condition, exit the loop without any errors, without anything. So that's how you do the exit do. And now we're going to go ahead and look at an example in Turbo Pascal. All right, so here we are in Turbo Pascal, and I uploaded the file loops. As you can see, I am using this. I'm going to use the clear screen, so I have to use the CRT. I only need one variable in this case, which is my I integer. Clearing the screen. Here's my for loop. For I colon equal 1 to 10 do begin, right I. And of course, we're doing the right because we want one right after the other. Right line will give you an extra line feed, right? It's an extra line feed. Here's my while loop, while I over 5, but we're starting with I equals 10, I colon equals 10. Well, let's do over 5, write it, and I'm doing a subtraction of 1 each time. And then I'm doing the repeat until. So again, another type of doing a loop. So I'm going to change the destination of the compilation. I'm going to make the file, save it to file. There it is. And sure, why not? Do loops. And here we go. My for loops all the way to 10. My while do is 6, and my repeat is from 10 to 1. But what if I wanted to break after a specific thing? Let's say I'm gonna do it right here on my for loop. As you recall, we can use the break command. So I'm gonna do if I equals to 5, then break. Add that command. I'm gonna save this. I'm going to change my destination to disk, make it successful. So now I'm gonna do loops. Now it only did it to 5 because of the break command. Oops. Again, a break will exit a loop. And here is my break command. Now let's go ahead and do the Turbo C++ loops example. Okay, so here we are in Turbo C++, and here's my loops example. I think I mistyped my name. There it goes. So we gotta include iostream.h and conio.h. Now in new C++ platforms, you don't have to do the H thing. Again, this is a little bit older C++ compiler, but for our purposes, it works fine. I'm gonna start with my int main. Again, I don't like to do the void main. It will work, but it is the correct way of doing it. And I'm gonna declare one variable of type int. I'm gonna clear the screen. And after that, I'm going to see out loops example. And as you know, the /n is a new line. So I'm doing it twice. So there's 2 lines in there. And then I'm going to do see out. I'm going to do the for loop for int. I'm declaring a new variable here. I equals 1 while I is less than 10. And then I'm going to increment by 1. And I'm going to see out it. And then at the end, this one is outside of the block here. I'm going to do an extra line. That's all that's doing right there. Now I'm going to do my wild. And I'm going to see out my n while. The n here, remember, is just a new line. While loop example. And here it is. While x less than 10, remember x was originally 1 over here. So while it's less than 10, print x and then increment x and then put an extra line in there. And there is the same example as the other ones. And then I'm gonna do my do while. So here's my do, and here's my block. Doesn't matter where this bracket is. And I'm gonna do that while, and here's my condition, while x over 3. And I'm gonna return 0, right? That's I don't return anything on this. So I'm gonna do is save my file. Yes, it exists, that's fine. I'm going to make the file. Perfect. And now I'm going to quit. And I think it's here where I put it. And there it is. There's my loops example. There's my for loop, my while loop, and my do while loop. And going back to the code, there it is. There's my code for my includes, my int. I'm gonna clear the screen. That's the only reason I put in the conio.h for clearing the screen. And I'm using cout instead of printf. No particular reason. I just wanted to do it that way. And inside it is the same. I have to /n for new lines. I have to, it's the same. Instead of doing it as a function, I'm doing it as a statement. That's all. And there's the code right there. Now we're going to in for the last examples that I'm going to be doing today, and that will be the Xojo examples. Okay, so we are here with Xojo programming. This is the last of the examples I'll be showing on loops. And I've already opened up my loops file. Here's my window 1. And what I did is I included from the library, I went ahead and included a text, a little text area. I included 2 buttons, a loop button and a quit button. They're just regular buttons. The quit button, all it does is does the quit command. That's all it does. The loop command, the text doesn't do anything. I got rid of the min and the max buttons, and the loop this is where all the code is, because I decided just to display on the text. And basically what I'm doing is saying, hey, look, I'm going to declare a few variables. S is a string, J is an integer, and then I'm going to do my little array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For my for loop, just like the other ones. Now, what I've decided to do here, because it is a visual environment, obviously here is different than on the other text one. So I'm creating a variable string and I'm adding to it all of the lines that I'm going to put on the text box. So here's my I from, and I'm doing the declaration from for I equals 1 to 10. This I is being declared in the for loop. So it is not being declared on the rest of the program. It's only good for this loop. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm adding I to string, and all of this is added to S. I'm just adding it to the end, and then I'm using the end of line, which is it does a carriage return, a little line feed. I'm also doing the do until. As you can recall from the PowerPoint, the do has two formats. You can do the do until. Here's my do until j equals 10, starting from 0. Or I can do a do loop until, which is the opposite. So I included both examples, the do until or the do loop. Okay, that both examples right there. I also have the while loop example, and you do one of the do loops or the while loops. They both do the same work. It's just a preference here. And then we have the for each. Remember, the for is similar to the for loop that we have here, except that here it is exclusively used for array items. If you're using a newer C environment, anything is C that is done the last 5 years or 10 years, you can do the for each as well in there. And here I'm saying, look, for each, and here's my new variable I had to redeclare it because this one's only for the for loop here. So I'm doing A. For this one, in each one of my array items, add them to it. And what I'm doing is adding see here, J equals J plus I, and I started with 0. I'm adding the numbers, and over here, I'm adding it to my string. So this is what happens when I run the program. I'm going to click run here. It's going to create a screen. Here's my loop screen. There's nothing in it. When I click loop, it's going to do all my loops, and it's going to put them on my text. Here's my for, my do until, my do loop until, my while, and my for each. Here's all my information. When I click quit, boom, it's gone. So there you have it. There's the examples of all the loops you can do in Xojo. And anyways, thank you for watching this video, and hopefully I'll see you next week. I'll be adding more videos next week. Thank you very much. And if you like it, please subscribe and like my video. Thank you very much.